Well, this, of course, is a point where the FBI agents who are involved are all of one view. That is, they all agree that the administration's narrative about Abu Zubaydah is simply not true. That is particularly the claim that these aggressive techniques were applied and information resulted that saved lives. I mean, the view that's come from the FBI agents who were involved in the process is that is a dangerous fantasy. It couldn't be further from the truth. This man was psychotic and delusional, and absolutely nothing he said, whether under these coercive techniques or without them, was in any way trustworthy. In fact, none of it proved to be trustworthy or usable in any way. So this, which has been held up as the gleaming, shiny example of why torture is a great thing, is just not true. I mean, it's another example of wild charges that rest on lies.
Well, now, here's something that I want to ask you about, see if you can clear up for me, being the international lawyer that you are. I always thought that part of the justification for pretending that the Geneva Conventions did not apply to the Taliban was that Afghanistan was a failed state. It was in the middle of a civil war. They didn't have monopoly control on violence throughout the whole country. Therefore, their signature no longer was relevant because they weren't really a government anymore. And yet, in Philip Sands' book, he explains that Doug Feith had come up with this novel theory of denying the Geneva Conventions applicability in order to save them.
Well, we were just talking about Abu Zubaydah being psychotic and delusional, but, I'd say you could use that description on Doug Feith any day. If you've seen this man out on the circuit now selling his book, he serves up so many whoppers, I begin to wonder if he really is capable of distinguishing between fantasy and reality in the world.
Well, he's made Northrop Grumman a lot of money, Scott.
I'm sure he has, and maybe this is the formula. That is, the more outrageously untrue it is, the more books you'll sell. That may be a formula that works. But going back to the substantive points you raised, it was never the law that a failed state, that because a state is a failed state, the Geneva Conventions doesn't apply. That's nonsense. John Yoo advanced that in the memorandum. I would say that was viewed as a quirky and kooky theory, even by, most conservative Republican legal scholars. Virtually, in fact, I begin to wonder if even John Yoo bought into that. So this whole idea of failed states, it's a notion that political scientists use to evaluate governments and formulate strategies and policies, but it really has no applicability whatsoever to the law and legal areas. I mean, the fact of the matter is that Afghanistan as a state has been recognized as a member of the international community since the middle of the 19th century, and it ratified the convention, so the convention applies, period. That's the end of the story. But there are other issues surrounding the Taliban and al-Qaeda and reasons why they may not be entitled to POW status. I think, the administration is on firmer territory.
Mm-hmm. And just to be specific, because I think it's kind of funny, for entertainment purposes only, Feith's theory, as described to Philip Sands in the book Torture Team, was that if you applied any of the protections of the Geneva Conventions, POW status notwithstanding, but any of the provisions in there, such as it's not okay to torture people and that kind of thing, that you would actually be weakening the Geneva Conventions, which he loved so much and wanted to preserve, because those protections, he said, only applied to men in uniform and people who were not unlawful enemy combatants.
Well, that's right. I mean, his view is that if you started really seriously recognizing and enforcing the Geneva Conventions, provisions, that nations all around the world would opt out of the Geneva Convention system, and it would just wither away and die. And therefore, it was only by this strategic pruning that it could be saved. Delusional, crazy. I think there's no question but that the greatest modern enemy of the Geneva Convention system, certainly in the English-speaking world, has been Doug Feith. Back during the Nixon administration, 1985, he ran an article in which he called the Geneva Conventions tools in the hands of terrorists. So he has worked passionately to undermine the Geneva Conventions for, more than 20 years.
Crazy. All right, now one more thing brought up in this FBI, or I guess DOJ IG report here, is that Chinese government officials were brought in and worked with the military interrogators. Tell me about that.
Well, that's right. That's an amazing thing. We had this group of 5 Uyghurs. Now, those are Muslims from Turkestan, in the far, far western part of China, who were captured and were brought to Guantanamo. And the U.S., after a while realized that this was just a mistake. These people were turned over for ransom money, and they really presented no threat, and they were not aligned with Al-Qaeda or anything of that sort. But while they were getting towards that conclusion, they brought the Chinese in. The Chinese were given an opportunity to do their own interrogating of these people, and the U.S. decided to soften them up in preparation for the Chinese interrogators. So here we have, communist Chinese interrogators coming in to question these people we later concluded were completely innocent. And the U.S. is using sleep deprivation and other brutal techniques to soften them up for the Chinese. Shocking. Absolutely shocking.
Well, that's the American system, right? That's how we do it.
Not the way it used to be.
All right, now, let's see. There was, the 27,000. Clive Stafford Smith, is that how you say it? I'm sorry, I don't have it in front of me. He says there's 27,000 ghost prisoners in secret jails, God knows where, around this world, under American control right now. Well,
the key element there is under American control, because the U.S. is going to say that they're not. I would say that we've got a number of different programs out there. So we have this ghost detainee program the CIA runs with high-value detainees. Let's say, we've probably got something like ballpark 150 people in that. Then we've got, a detention system in Iraq, and you've got to check every day to see how many people we've got there. But it's been fluctuating between 10 and 15,000. That is an American detention, not under Iraqi detention. And then we also have these sort of shadowy arrangements we've set up with the Ethiopians down in the Horn of Africa, with the Moroccans, with the Egyptians, with the Yemenis, in which, formally speaking, they're detaining people. But there are a lot of people who've gone down and looked at these relationships, and they've said, boy, it sure looks like a CIA or U.S.-run detention facility to me. We also have one of these facilities, 2 of them actually, in Afghanistan. We have several of them in Pakistan, and we have some in Southeast Asia. So there is a sort of an archipelago of very, very shadowy detention facilities that the U.S. is running across a wide swath of the world right now.
And in fact, there's a new prison going in Afghanistan. They said that the one at Bagram, face it, it's just not in any condition to be a permanent prison there.
Well, that's right. In fact, if you saw the documentary film Taxi to the Dark Side, that starts with some incidents that occurred at Bagram Air Base, and it includes a review of the detention facility there, which is primitive. But this is producing friction between us and our ally in Afghanistan, just as it does between us and our ally in Iraq, because the U.S. Position seems to be to detain thousands and thousands of people, frequently on flimsy evidence or no evidence, and then not to process them. Not to present them with charges, not to give them a trial. It's completely like something out of Kafka. And the local governments say, we can't do that. We actually have to live with our population here, and our population is concerned that we're doing something that looks like justice.
Right. Well, it's kind of pretty bad for America's reputation when we're actually using, for example, the site in Poland was a former German intelligence command center during World War II, and then was some sort of training base or something for the Russians. It was occupied, this little base was occupied by the Nazis, and then by the Soviets, and then by America's torture team.